The final whistle blew, the scoreline looked comfortable, and Lionel Messi had just matched one of the most untouchable records in World Cup history. That should have been the story. Instead, within minutes, football fans were freezing screenshots, slowing down replays, arguing across social media, and asking a question that refused to go away. Why was Messi still on the pitch? Because buried underneath the goals, the celebrations, and the headlines was a moment that turned a routine tournament opener into something much bigger. A moment that some people believe should have changed the entire match. A moment that reopened one of football's oldest and most uncomfortable debates. Does superstar status change the way football is officiated? And once that question appeared, everything became more complicated. At first, Argentina versus Algeria looked like exactly what everyone expected from a World Cup opener involving the reigning champions. Intensity, quality, chaos. The opening minutes were so frantic that both teams thought they had scored. Both teams celebrated. Both teams were denied. VAR immediately became part of the story. Not because it was controversial, because it was working. Marginal decisions, tiny details, offside calls measured by inches. The kind of moments modern football tells us technology exists to solve. And that is what makes everything that happened later so fascinating. The match had already established one thing. Fine margins mattered, every touch mattered, every challenge mattered, every decision mattered. Or at least that was the expectation. Then came the incident. Messi challenged for the ball. Algeria's defender went down. The contact was obvious. The replay was obvious. The debate exploded immediately. Some viewers saw a completely normal football challenge. Others saw something very different. They saw a challenge that endangered an opponent. They saw excessive force. They saw a red card. And once millions of people start watching the same clip frame by frame, football enters dangerous territory. Because football is one of the few sports where everyone believes they know exactly what they are seeing. The tackle happened. It's on camera. Yet somehow the conclusions couldn't have been more different. Former players disagreed. Pundits disagreed. Fans disagreed. Even refereeing experts couldn't seem to land in the same place. Some argued that a yellow card would have been enough. Others insisted that not showing any card at all was impossible to justify. And then came the detail that pushed the controversy even further. Nothing happened. No red card, no yellow card. Play continued. Messi stayed on the field. The game moved forward, but the conversation didn't. Because when a controversial tackle results in a red card, people complain and eventually move on. When a controversial tackle results in no punishment whatsoever, people start asking different questions. Questions about consistency, questions about standards, questions about who is involved, and that's where this stopped being about a single challenge. Because the moment Lionel Messi's name became attached to the incident, the discussion expanded beyond one match. It became a referendum on football itself. For years, fans have argued about what some call superstar protection, the belief that football's biggest names receive treatment that ordinary players never would. It's not a new accusation. It's not even a Messi-specific accusation. The same arguments have followed the sport's biggest stars for decades. Different eras, different leagues, different tournaments, same debate. Would the referee make the same decision if the player involved wasn't one of the most famous athletes on earth? It's a simple question, but football has never produced a simple answer. Supporters of Messi immediately pointed to something important. They argued that people were focusing on one replay angle while ignoring the speed of the game. Football happens in fractions of a second. Players commit challenges while running at full speed. Contact alone doesn't automatically equal a red card. And they had a point. The laws of the game leave room for interpretation. That's why debates like this exist in the first place. But critics weren't convinced. Because modern football introduced VAR for exactly these situations. The technology exists to catch what referees miss. The technology exists to review dangerous incidents. The technology exists to remove uncertainty. At least that's the promise. So when millions of viewers looked at the same footage and came away asking why there wasn't even a review visible to the public, frustration began growing rapidly. Not because everyone agreed it was a red card, because everyone wanted to understand how the conclusion had been reached. And suddenly the focus shifted away from Messi entirely. Now the spotlight was on the system, the officials, the communication process, the decision-making chain, the transparency, or lack of it. Football's relationship with VAR has always been complicated. The technology was introduced as a solution. Instead, many fans believe it simply created new arguments. Before VAR, controversial decisions were blamed on human error. After VAR, controversial decisions often create an even bigger problem, because now people know multiple officials had access to multiple camera angles and still reached the same conclusion. That changes the nature of the criticism, and that's exactly what happened here. The incident became less about whether Messi intended anything, less about whether the contact was accidental, less about the outcome of the challenge. The real controversy became confidence. How much confidence should supporters have in a system when obvious disagreement exists immediately afterward? The more people discussed the challenge, the stranger the situation became, because Argentina ultimately won, comfortably. The result itself wasn't hanging on a knife edge. This wasn't a 93rd minute penalty. This wasn't a title-deciding mistake. The match wasn't stolen, yet the controversy kept growing. Why? Because some people believed they were watching a glimpse into a bigger issue. Not a match problem, a trust problem. And trust is much harder to repair. Once fans begin questioning whether rules are applied equally, every future decision becomes vulnerable. Every controversial call gains extra weight. Every replay gains extra scrutiny. Every major star becomes part of the argument. That's how isolated incidents evolve into narratives. And football is built on narratives. The story became even more complicated when people began revisiting previous incidents from previous tournaments and previous seasons. Old clips resurfaced. Old debates returned. Old accusations found new life. That's what happens when a controversy connects to an existing belief. People stop evaluating one event. They start building a pattern. Whether that pattern is real or not almost becomes secondary. The perception itself starts driving the conversation. And perception is incredibly powerful, especially during a World Cup, especially when the player involved is Lionel Messi, because Messi occupies a unique position in football. He isn't just a player, he's an institution, a global icon, a figure whose every touch generates headlines, which means every controversial moment involving him automatically receives 10 times the attention it otherwise would. A challenge from an unknown player might dominate discussion for a day. A challenge involving Messi can dominate discussion for weeks. That's the reality, and it's exactly why this incident refused to disappear after the final whistle. Still, there is a counter-argument worth acknowledging. Many observers genuinely believe there was no scandal at all. They argue that social media has trained football fans to search for outrage, that every major tournament now produces a controversy whether one exists or not, that slow-motion replays distort reality, that physical contact is being reinterpreted through freeze frames, and they believe this incident belongs in that category. It's a fair point. Maybe they're right. Maybe the challenge looked worse than it actually was. Maybe officials handled it correctly. Maybe this entire debate says more about modern football culture than the challenge itself. But even that explanation leaves one problem unsolved. People still don't agree, not remotely. And that disagreement is the real story, because the objective facts haven't changed. The footage hasn't changed. The outcome hasn't changed. Yet football remains deeply divided. One side sees a perfectly acceptable decision. The other sees a major officiating failure. And somewhere between those positions sits a governing system trying to convince everyone that the process worked exactly as intended. That is where things stand now. Messi's record remains. Argentina's victory remains. The result remains. But so do the questions. Questions about consistency. Questions about accountability. Questions about whether football's biggest stars are judged by exactly the same standards as everyone else. The challenge is over. The match is over. The tournament moves forward. Yet the argument keeps growing, because the moment people stop debating a tackle and start debating trust, the controversy becomes bigger than any single game. And that is why this story refuses to disappear. Not because everyone agrees something went wrong, because millions of people can't agree on whether anything went wrong at all. And for football's officials, that may be the most dangerous outcome of all.